This is how my backyard looked only a year ago.
It was nothing more than your standard grass-covered lawn. Riveting.
Instead, I wanted a nature paradise where I could coexist with wildlife only feet from my house. However, that wasn't going to create itself. The first step was to install a large pond that would serve as the hubcap from which everything else originates. My grand plan was to finish the first phase of that all within a year. I was able to do a lot in that time, but it wasn't enough.
I failed and had to accept the fact that my expectations were unrealistic. This will actually take years to complete, especially as my vision continues to evolve.
Even though I couldn't hold up my end of the bargain, nature was gracious, deciding to use what I could provide at the time despite being incomplete. Hundreds of frogs came and went, producing thousands of babies as they did. Birds who lost everything to a parasite defied the odds and successfully raised an entire nest. Nomadic animals frequently passed through to see me building things like the pollinator garden, which attracted countless beneficial insects, including monarch butterflies. The goldfish, who were the reason this pond came to be, also made new life of their own. The vast majority of that occurred during the spring and summer months. Now leaves are falling from the trees, temperatures are dropping, days have become shorter, and many creatures who frequented the waters seem to have moved on until warmer days return. However, pond season wasn't over yet. Despite how things may have appeared, life was still in full effect, and more secrets were about to reveal themselves. These ponds don't require much maintenance, but I find it most important to do that in the spring and fall. I wanted to do as much as possible before it got too cold. Little did I know what I'd soon discover when I got to work. The algae I battled earlier this year returned, and it had to go. This will eventually stop being an issue when the environment gains equilibrium, which usually takes about 3 years. Until then, I have to see it or remove it. And I don't find it particularly appealing, so I'll take the latter. The marginals I planted earlier this year will be critical in the algae's natural decline by removing nutrients it feeds on. Maximum plant growth is the goal, but the mint went too wild. Keeping it in check is essential because, as you can see, it gets way out of hand, and in fact I'll likely remove it altogether when the other plants fully integrate. I was going through the motions netting algae without a second thought until I saw movement on the rock. Thankfully there was some water to sustain an unexpected tadpole. I returned it as quickly as I could and sifted through the rest. I didn't see any others in what I removed, but many were in the pond, which had me perplexed. Why was I seeing them this late in the season? I thought to myself, 4 unique species of frogs including American toads, spring peepers, gray tree frogs, and green frogs were trying to breed at the pond. All would have laid their eggs months ago, and froglets had already left the waters to grow up. I failed to document the green frogs, but they were growing well. I also occasionally find pristine young toads in the outskirts that inspire me and make me hopeful for their future. Maybe one day they'll return to the waters where they were born to have children of their own. These were too large to belong to anyone but the green frogs, or so I thought, until I realized something. There was that random bullfrog who showed up in spring, which I kept seeing as it grew. At any given time, it and several other frogs were visible, with silly antics often ensuing. For a while I thought this was the only bullfrog, but as some of the others grew, I realized there was quite a few of them. The green frogs did their thing, but I never heard the bullfrogs calling or saw breeding. However, tadpoles from both species take years to complete their metamorphosis and look similar, so finding them this late in the year makes sense. I won't say definitively, but based on their characteristics, I think these are most likely bullfrog tadpoles. Either way, this brings up the audience concerns about them being here. I'm honestly fine for them to live here, even if they'll eat a few things, because they're another native species.
Of course, I'd prefer if they didn't eat the smaller frogs or my fish, but that's probably inevitable.
The baby fish from months earlier have grown significantly, and they weren't alone. I realized there was a completely new round of them when I was trimming the plants in the basin, but they were so small I couldn't even get footage of them. If they keep reproducing this much, I suppose bullfrogs getting a fish or two might not be a bad thing. I even had the opportunity to adopt 2 fish from my cousin, Tilly and Jimmy.
Many question my decision to keep goldfish because they're not native and often invasive.
Believe me, I understand the logic, but this pond was made for them and otherwise wouldn't exist. Also, their invasiveness is mainly from irresponsible people, releasing them into places they don't belong, which I won't do. There's also the thought that they'll eat everything in the pond, including tadpoles, but if I had native fish, that wouldn't happen. In reality, this will occur anywhere with fish, native or not, that aren't small. Of course, the frogs know this, which is why they reproduce by the thousands. And as you've seen, despite many fish and the pond not being as densely planted as it will eventually be, countless tadpoles still completed their metamorphosis. That said, their odds will increase exponentially next year and in the ones to follow as the plants develop, and when I add other water features in the surrounding landscape that won't house large fish.
One of those features is going to go off the left of this seating area here and pretty much fill up most of the space going through the rocks and down in here. And the crazy thing is that the way I'm going to set this up, it's going to be perfect for the animals that decided to take up residence under these rocks.
I piled the stones here simply to tidy the yard. What ended up happening though is that I unintentionally created a place of refuge for red-backed salamanders. I was shocked to find them in the middle of the yard like this because I think of salamanders living in shaded areas. I'm glad I couldn't add the feature yet because now that I know they want to live here, I can build it more in line with their needs.
You know, it's always when I overturn a rock, look behind a leaf, or simply take a closer look that I find inspiration. Something that's always done that for me and played a huge role in this pond's development is moss.
It has a way of naturalizing these spaces unlike anything else. It's created countless microhabitats around the pond that can only be described as magical. Each is unique in its own way, including the animals that use them. They often harbor little plants that take time to form, like these ferns. Some are more developed, which makes me curious how will all appear when the others do the same. The big picture matters, but I don't think it would look as significant without all these small details. It's kind of like how a home without decorations appears liminal.
Even with all of these elements taking shape, it's very evident to me when viewing this all from the new vantage point of the deck that a lot of crucial components are still missing. It too is incomplete, but even now it greatly improves the view of everything and serves as an awesome platform to begin our journey into the Oasis.
Stepping down to the water's edge on this rock reveals one of my favorite views. You can truly appreciate the beauty of the fish and waterfalls from here. Moving toward the left should draw you into other features. However, much of this is in shambles like the flagstone path and hillside, both of which I'll address next year. Things change as you scale the rocky stairs. This platform provides a unique view, with the pond on one side, the future salamander habitat on the other, the pollinator garden behind, and select plantings in the front. The culmination of these elements is intended to create a place of relaxation. There's also the swinging bench, which I designed to fit perfectly at the top of the falls. It's one of my favorite views because you can appreciate the pooling areas and the habitats created within them. You can easily step down to the rocks and to the other side from here, which for now is just grass. A unique feature will eventually transform this space and connect the deck below with something completely different in the yard above. The end goal is for everything to be interconnected. There will be almost no grass, countless features for the animals to utilize, and areas where we can enjoy their presence. Most recently, the squirrels have diligently collected nuts for the colder months, using my air conditioner as their processing headquarters. The deer have also passed through like usual, which is always a joy. This journey has had its fair share of criticism. There's always someone to disagree with every choice you've made, and that's fine. We all have different perspectives.
I don't feel the need to explain myself on much, but there was one decision that I made which transpired up here that I had no idea would be so divisive.
Earlier in the season, I documented a parasitic cowbird tampering with the nest of an eastern phoebe. Many thought I should intervene. I'm going to start by stating that nature is brutal. It doesn't care how we feel about it. Like most of you, I didn't find pleasure in what happened, and I didn't even know it did until I reviewed the time-lapse footage. Unfortunately, this is just what cowbirds do. They don't build their own nests and won't raise their own young. It just doesn't happen. Plus, it's illegal to tamper with their eggs, and to make matters worse, they're spiteful. When a host bird or someone who thinks they're being helpful removes their eggs, the cowbird often returns to destroy all of them. All that's to say, intervention isn't wise.
I wasn't even going to formally address this, but now you know.
I may be disappointed I couldn't complete this in a single year, but it just wasn't possible. Even so, it's still wild to see how everything developed. It's truly night and day from what it was. Besides the initial phase of the pond which Aquascape helped me build, I did everything else alone. I thought I could have done more than I did, but weather setbacks, illnesses, and much more I won't discuss made it all take forever. I guess it was all for the better though, because now I have a clearer picture of how to proceed. I gotta say, the best part of it all, and what I feel so blessed to have witnessed, was thousands of animals do their thing in a space I modified only 12 months ago. It was a joy, and I'm grateful to have shared it with all of you.
That said, I'm left with one question. What else happened that I completely missed?
At the end of the day, this series was an experiment. If I were to do it over, I would have told it as a single cohesive story. I wanted to know what that would look like, and decided to re-script, revoice, and edit the entire thing into a single video. I liked it so much that I believe it's the definitive way to experience this, and decided to put it on the other channel. I've linked that up here along with another pond video. A huge thanks to everyone that enjoyed all of the hard work I put into this. Your feedback was incredible. I have big plans for the rest of the yard, so if you don't want to miss out on those and future uploads, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Until next time, Serpa Squad, take care and peace.